give them a firm handshake, and really just be present in absorbing what it is that they have to say. Hey everyone, welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello, and today I am coming at you from my old room that I grew up in, which is kind of funny. And there's furniture here. I couldn't really find a great place to record, but I managed to put together some light, a random light, my webcam, my microphone, which is on a piano chair, and I'm sitting crisscross on the floor. And this is where I'm going to be doing today's episode. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're wondering what the heck is in my surroundings, that's what's going on. But if you're listening to this on the podcast version, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. So anyway, let's get right into the show. Today, we're going to be talking about how to network effectively. I do feel that I am very good at this just because I had done so much practice, especially before the pandemic, before COVID. I was going to 2 to 3 networking events a week, and I was actually in a business development role. If you remember the story, if you've listened to a lot of my podcasts, you may recall that I used to work at a house buying company in 2018, an investment company. And the guys who owned it, one of the guys was kind of mentoring me in a way and giving me some tips on how to network effectively. And he gave me a couple of pointers, such as whenever you go out and you're networking and you're connecting with someone, ask them, who here do I have to meet? Who do I absolutely have to meet? And if you can ask people that when you meet them, they've already gone and done their networking as well. So chances are that they may have talked to 3 or 4 people already, and they can kind of triangulate the best people to talk to. And if you do this every time you meet with someone and you ask, who should I meet? Who do you recommend that I meet? And they've already gone and met people, and like one person really stands out to them. You keep doing that over and over again, and you're going to be able to meet kind of the cream of the crop, the best of the best. And this isn't really to say that you won't find value from talking to random people, because I think that honestly, yes, you can actually get a lot of value from meeting people that you might not have otherwise met. So being intentional about being open to conversations with anyone, I think that's very important. But whenever you do ask that question, you might be able to meet some really heavy hitters that you might not otherwise meet. If you think about going to a networking event and there's 50 people or 100 people there, realistically, you're probably only going to meet 5 to 10 people, maybe a little bit more, depending on how talkative you are or how quick you are to go and meet new people, right? So this way, this enables you to meet some of the really cool people that you might not otherwise meet. Again, just stats. There's 100 people in the room. You're only going to talk to 5 to 10. If you use this approach, you can make sure that those 5 people that you connect with were at least vouched for by someone else that you recently met at the event. So that's a quick tip. But whenever it comes to networking, I think it's very important to actually remain present, give people eye contact, really show them that you are there and you are having that conversation with them as if they are the only person in that room. This is very important. I think a lot of times people tend to multitask. They're looking around, they're checking their phones. They're kind of disrespectful in a way. And I know I'm bad at this sometimes with people that I know or like my friends, but when I am networking and I'm meeting people, I do my best to really just give them a firm handshake and really just be present in absorbing what it is that they have to say. And it's kind of like sales in a way. The rule of thumb that I hear with a good sales presentation is that it's actually 80% listening, 20% asking questions. And you want to be more interested in them than they are in you. If you're just acting like they're the cream of the crop and the top of the world and the top of the food chain, people will eat that up and they really love that. And I'm giving you advice that I need to remember to take myself too, because personally, I tend to bring the conversation back to me. We all like talking about ourselves. We all like bragging or comparing something that we hear in someone else's story. Some of us like to add a story that was similar, you have that one up effect. I definitely am guilty of this. So I'm not saying that I'm the best at this, but I think it is very important to remember that we are talking to someone who has a really cool story. They've probably got a lot of great experience, and we need to let them showcase that to us and ask them questions. And again, they're going to really love that, because if out of 10 conversations, 9 people that they talk about themselves, and you're the one person to actually ask them questions and be interested in what they have to say, their conversation with you is going to stand out more in their minds than everybody else that they met. Something else that works well, obviously, there's people who have business cards, collecting their cards, giving them your cards. That goes a long way. But also connecting on social media. This has been a strategy that I've done more and more of recently, is just right then and there, hey, are you on Instagram? Are you on Facebook? I'm going to send you a friend request, because we all know people send us a million different friend requests. They follow us on Instagram oftentimes, and I'm not actively checking to see all the requests that I have, right? You probably aren't either. And things get lost in the shuffle. There's probably people who are sitting in my requested friends list that I know or that I've met and that I just haven't remembered or haven't thought about. And I'm too overwhelmed to go in there and sift through to figure out who it is that has sent me a friend request that I haven't accepted just yet. But if you are there when they pull out their phone and you send them a friend request and they confirm it right there on the spot, boom, you just got past that waiting list of the friend request cemetery, that it doesn't really die or disappear. It'll always remain there, but chances are they're not just going to mysteriously dive in there and confirm your request. And if they do, it might be a couple of weeks or months out whenever they get that urge to check that. It's one of those things that's like checking your spam emails. You don't really intentionally check that every day. Maybe you do it once every couple months to quote unquote clean out the clutter or take out the trash type thing. I think that's what people do it more as, is like that longer, less frequent routine. So that's a quick way to jump to the top, get them on your friends list, confirm that friendship or following on Instagram or whatever platform you're using. And now they're going to start to be able to see your stories. You'll see theirs. You'll get to interact, reply to their stories, send them messages, and they actually know who you are, instead of you being a random person that they're not sure who exactly you are, right? Because if they haven't met you yet, they're less likely to accept your friend request, to read your messages, and to DM you or reply to your DM, versus if you actually made a warm connection in person. I'm a little bit out of practice personally on the networking game. I did mention before COVID, before the pandemic and the lockdowns, I was going to 2 to 3 events a week. And of course, for the last, couple of years, less events, more virtual events, I got out of practice. I got out of my habit of doing it. I was doing a million Zoom calls, Clubhouse calls. I've got a weekly Clubhouse call that we've actually still been doing with some of my friends and colleagues, people who are in the real estate space or just that I've been connected to for quite some time. We've been doing a weekly call. And so a lot of virtual calls have taken over. And I think that's kind of the baseline. People just default to doing a Zoom call or doing a Clubhouse call. We forgot how to be present, how to shake people's hands, how to sit there and have a real conversation for 10 minutes instead of turning our cameras off and listening in on mute like so many people do on Zoom calls. And so this is going to take a little bit getting used to and getting back into the swing of things for all of us. The podcast conference that I recently talked about, I actually got a really good opportunity to start practicing my networking again, shaking hands, seeing someone that I want to connect with, meeting the person right next to them. They introduced me to the person that I was wanting to connect with in the end, and just made some really cool connections this way. I did all the tips that I'm telling you. I shook their hand. I acted like they were the only person in that place that I was talking to. I gave them my undivided attention, asked them about their podcasts, asked them to tell me about their businesses, themselves, their families, and really did my best to remember as many details as I could. Like, I'm thinking of one guy and he's, married and has a kid and he lives in Houston, and we know each other now. We have that connection. I know his podcast. He told me about one speaking engagement where they were going to be critiquing his podcast and his cover and his intro. We went there. My friend and I actually popped into that meeting. He saw us there. So right there, we built rapport, we built a real relationship. And I know the feedback that they gave him, I actually joked about it later. I was like, man, they were so harsh on you. But then again, to be fair, they were harsh with everyone's intros and giving, feedback to people on what their cover looked like. And if their first 30 seconds of their podcast actually made sense or gave away what their podcast was about. So that kind of stuff, he knows that I actually listened to it and that I wasn't just saying, yeah, whatever, I'm going to attend it, and then never did. Right. So that built up some of the rapport and credibility seeds because I took initiative and I actually followed up there. And that's a real connection. Another guy that I met at one of the nightclubs afterwards, like the bar, when they have sponsors that come out and pay for drinks and stuff like that at the conference. I actually messaged him. I heard him on a webinar that Calendly did a year ago. And I messaged him on LinkedIn, said, hey, great job. I really got some value out of this presentation. And we kind of maybe messaged one or two times back and forth. And to be honest, I think I dropped the ball and I just never replied to his last message. But when we connected there in person, he was standing next to this other person that I mentioned earlier. I shook his hand. He told me his name. And I'm like, dude, I'm pretty sure I listened to your webinar with Calendly like last year. And I messaged you on LinkedIn and we pulled it up and I'm like, oops, yeah, I was the last person who read his message and never replied. But immediately right then and there, I said, man, I'd love to have you on my podcast. I got a lot of value. It'd be really cool to just share your message with my audience. And literally 11 p.m. on like a Wednesday or Thursday, or what I think it was a Thursday night or whatever, 10 or 11 p.m. We're there. The music's freaking loud. We're yelling at each other. I almost lost my voice because we were having such a hard time talking to each other because of the noise. And I'm screaming at him like, dude, I gotta get you on my podcast. It would be awesome to have you on the show. And he's like, yeah, for sure. Right then and there, he opens up his email app. He emails his assistant and copies me saying, hey, can you please make sure I snag a spot on Chris's show? And then right then and there, I replied back and said, it'd be awesome to have him on the show. Here's my booking link whenever works best. First thing in the morning the next day, his assistant scheduled a time and he's going to be interviewed here on my show, I think in the following week or two. It's on the calendar. It's confirmed. So long as nothing comes up and we don't have to reschedule, we're going to have that conversation and I'll be able to share that interview with you. And that's how these little seeds are planted. But being effective at communicating, at following up, at capturing people's information, at connecting with them on social media, all those things really come together really well so that you can stay in touch. They remember who you are. You're a memorable person where 2 years from now, when you see them at an event, they're going to recall your name instantly and remember what you do, what your podcast is about, maybe even where you're from or details about your family. Whereas if you never had any of those little conversations, you never asked any of those questions, they may kind of remember you by your face, but they won't really remember what you do, who you are, where you live, what your podcast is about, whatever the case may be. Right. So the goal here is just really create real relationships and become memorable in the minds of the people that you meet, and do that over and over again continuously and ideally at scale eventually. You can't scale everything. I know I'm really big on automation, productivity, delegation, but ultimately I can't outsource the shaking of someone's hand and talking to them like I did at this podcast event or at any networking event. You can't necessarily just automate and delegate that out. And even if you can, chances are that someone's going to drop the ball on the messaging, just like I did on the LinkedIn thread. I had never replied back to his message, and our last message was in September of 2021. Here I am recording this for you a year later in 2022, September. And we finally picked up where we left off in terms of, hey, let's actually have a conversation. Let's get you on my podcast. Let's schedule it. So the seeds initially were planted like a year ago with a couple of DMs back and forth that fizzled out because, you get so many DMs. I get overwhelmed sometimes. I stop replying to stuff. I stop checking my DMs for weeks at a time because it's just too many messages, too many replies to my stories, too many comments on Instagram or Facebook photos and things like that. And it gets very frustrating. And I just kind of like leave it and go off on to working on other things. Ideally, it would be great to just stay in touch with people. So another pro tip is if you can schedule a follow-up call of some sort, maybe shoot them a Calendly link and say, hey, it was awesome connecting with you. I know we only got to talk for a couple of minutes. How about we set up a time to chat via Zoom a little bit more just to get to know each other, and send out like a connection Zoom call link or phone call link, 15 minutes, quick intro touch point, have a couple of fields in there asking like first name, last name, what problem do you help solve, or who's your ideal client? Is there anything that you're stuck on that I might be able to help you with, for example? And so when you jump on that connection call, you get to learn more about them and talk to them in more detail in a quieter setting where you're not at some super loud event or a very busy event where everyone's just trying to do the numbers game and shake everyone's hand type thing. And then B, you actually know ahead of time with those fields that you're asking for in something like Calendly, you know exactly what it is that you want to do in terms of what do they do, how can you help, how can you work together, and you know more about them, and you can kind of store that in your CRM, in an Excel document, wherever it is that you track this information. You can get a good handle on more information about them, right? It's really nice whenever you can go to like your dentist, for example, and your hygienist has notes from the last time 6 months ago on something you talked about, and they bring it up like, hey, I know you said you were going to do this. Did you end up skiing? Like, oh yeah, you're getting married. Like those little details where at first you're really impressed, like, wow, this person has amazing memory. And then you realize, no, they just take really good notes, but it's still, it goes a long way in making you feel like, okay, they care about you. They're bringing up memories and things that you like to talk about, most likely. And it makes you feel good and kind of makes a whole overall experience and relationship a lot better overall. So, those are some of the tips that I have for you on networking effectively with people and just following up, growing your CRM, and maintaining real, true connections and contacts. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions or anything, if you're on YouTube, make sure to comment below, drop any comments, DM me on Instagram. Although, like I just said, I'm pretty bad at getting back to those recently. I just have not been checking them as much as I usually do. And I look forward to catching you on the next episode, hopefully in a better setting. I've got to get better at actually batching my content. But again, I don't think you really care about where I am and where I'm sitting. And I'm sitting on the floor here in the bedroom that I grew up in because we're visiting Houston, going to a friend's wedding this Friday, and then heading back to Denver. But with that said, I'll catch you on the next episode. If you got any topic ideas that you want me to cover, go to chrisbello.com/askchris. I believe that is a URL. Submit a Google form submission with what exactly you want to learn next, and I'll be sure to create content around that. So again, hope you found that helpful, and I'll talk to you on the next episode. Thanks so much for your time. Talk soon.